Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the December 3rd Local Employment Dynamics or LED webinar. Before I introduce today's speaker, let's go over a few housekeeping rules. As mentioned earlier, this webinar is being recorded. For your convenience, it will be uploaded to our Census Academy site with all supplemental materials relating to the webinar within 30 business days. We welcome your questions during the webinar. Please submit your questions using the Q&A panel, which is located at the bottom right corner of your WebEx screen. Once you've found the Q&A panel, make sure you choose all panelists from the drop-down menu. This will ensure we see your questions. As time allows, we will answer your questions directly through the Q&A panel, or we will share your questions with the presenter to respond to during the Q&A portion of the webinar. Also, we ask that you do not include any personal or business identifiable information with your questions. We suggest keeping that chat panel open as we will provide key links and other resources throughout the webinar. Keep in mind, you won't be able to respond to the chat. That is for us to send out links and other resources related to the presentation. As you know, we are in a virtual environment and sometimes technical difficulties might occur. If you are having issues, try a different browser or consider logging out and coming back into the session. If you are having audio issues, try selecting computer audio or calling into the webinar via phone. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the Local Employment Dynamics Partnership, in collaboration with the Council for Community and Economic Research and the Labor Market Information, it is my pleasure to welcome my colleague and friend, Tyson Weister, as he presents Getting Started with the PSEO and QWI API. This presentation explores the Post-Secondary Employment Outcomes, or PSEO, and the Quarterly Workforce Indicators, or QWI, Application Programming Interface, or API, a tool for accessing workforce data, including employment, earnings, and job trends. Tyson will cover the API structure, key parameters, and how to construct queries. A live demonstration will provide practical experience to help users retrieve and analyze labor market data effectively for research. Tyson Weister is a survey statistician on the U.S. Census Bureau's communications team for centralized data dissemination. In this role, he engages data users and helps them navigate data.census.gov, Microdata Access, and the application programming interface. Tyson holds bachelor's degrees in economic and public affairs from Indiana University and a master's degree in communications from Purdue University. With that, I hand it over to Tyson.
Great. Thank you, Erlene, and thank you all so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. We are excited to talk all about the API and give a live demonstration for how to access the LEHD datasets that are in our API. So let's move forward with what we have planned today. What I'm going to give is a little bit of an introduction for background information about the API, what you can get in it, and why you might want to use it. Just as a note, this presentation does not require any specific knowledge of an API. So if you haven't used one before, please do not be intimidated. We will go step by step, very methodically, and you'll also have these slides to look back on, which will cover each click I'm making in the live demonstration. So know that that exists for you as a resource after the fact. But to start off with our introduction here, the Census Bureau data in the API is even more expansive than what you may find elsewhere across the Census Bureau. So in terms of what we're focusing on today, I mentioned we'll of course be diving into the LEHD data sets in the API. We're going to start with our first example through the quarterly workforce indicators data. And then we'll do another example using the post-secondary employment outcomes PSEO. But as a note, as you can see through this slide, there are very many detailed data sets available on the API. And the skills that we're talking about today are not exclusive to accessing any one particular data set in the API. So a lot of what you learn, if you're interested in other data from the Census Bureau and want to consume it through the API, you'll be able to take what you learned today and apply it to other data sets and types of data requests. So we mentioned here, we will be focusing on the two LEHD data sets in the API. You'll be accessing the information through the developers page. You can get to this portal by visiting census.gov/developers or api.census.gov. This is going to be your entry point to navigating to specific data sets that you want in the API, the documentation, signing up for an API key if you'd like to use one, and a whole lot more. We're not going to cover all of the resources housed in this portal today. What we're going to be focusing on is how to navigate the long list of data sets in our discovery tool. So as of November 28th, we had 1,726 total data sets in the discovery tool. And there's 4 that are specific to what we're talking about today. So we're going to show you how to get to those 4 data sets and then make data requests to get the information that you're looking for. And just as a note, with the API key, those are typically optional unless you're making a large amount of requests from our API. You would sign up for an API key if you're making more than 500 API data requests per IP address per day. We won't be using an API key today, but if you do need one, they are free to sign up and you just need an email to register. So once we get to the API developers page, I mentioned we'll be going to the discovery tool. You can navigate to the list of the discovery tool in those very detailed data sets, either in HTML, XML, or JSON format. And what you're going to be looking for is to find the one entry for the data set that you're interested in. You can see the screenshot at the bottom of this slide shows an example from the ACS data set. And they all have very similar links within them. So all you really need to get started with an API is really working off of 2 of these links. We're going to take an example query. So we're not going to be building anything out from scratch. You'll be essentially, for this particular webinar, using our web browser and editing an example URL to tweak the request for the specific data points that we're interested in. So no memorization needed. You can go to this list of example queries and make edits from them. And then the other thing that we'll be consulting very heavily is the list of variables applicable to the data set that will allow us to tweak the example query with exactly what we're looking for. So the purpose here is just kind of showing you do have access to the API discovery tool in full. What we're going to be doing is finding that one entry point for the data set we're interested in, and then just really consulting 2 different sections in order to get what we're looking for. But if you'd like to dive in, there's lots more detailed information through the discovery tool. Now, I'm not going to focus too heavily today on why you might use an API. This is definitely more focused on how to go about using the API and making the requests. There are a variety of reasons why you might choose to use the API. The one that I'm going to highlight very heavily here today, though, because it's applicable to the LEHD datasets, is that it is super easy once you've gone through the process to get the data you're interested in. What's nice about these data sets is you can access them over time. So once you have constructed the perfect API query or URL, when new LEHD data are released, you can make a simple tweak to that URL and instantly retrieve the updated information. There are, again, many other benefits to using an API, but that is one that is highly relevant to today's discussion that I wanted to point out. So with that background information, what I'm going to do now is focus on how to build an API request. Now, the purpose of me showing you these slides is not for you, again, to memorize how to build these from scratch. It is an introduction for you to start recognizing the different portions of the API query or URL so that you know how to tweak them. and what they mean on a high level. So every API data request is going to start with api.census.gov/data. Next, you'll see information added with the specific data set name. So this example I'm walking through right now on the slides is coming, of course, from the time series, the PSEO data set, and it's specifically the post-secondary employment outcome flows data set. You can find a list of all of the available API time series data sets using the link at the bottom. After your data set, you are going to have $get equals, and that is signaling to the API that you are requesting for data to be returned to you. Immediately after the equal sign, you're going to have a list of variables. And what is especially useful and beneficial for these data sets we're discussing today, these are very readable labels. So you can see, as an example, we have Y1, so year one, grads, EMP for employed. So that would be returning data for people graduated from a degree program who are employed 1 year after graduation. The next variable is NAICS, and then we have some variables here for the labels, which we'll discuss in more details momentarily. So essentially what we're getting is, again, the number of students who are employed 1 year after graduation in different industries. And you can list up to 50 variables in this list, separated by a comma, no spaces in between. After your list of variables, you will be specifying the geography or geographies that you're interested in accessing data for. You'll notice that this portion of the URL is separated by an ampersand, where it says, in this example, &4 equals US:1. So this is just giving us data at the national level, regardless of where the workers are currently employed in the United States. And then at the very end, you also have options within these data sets for adding predicates. So this is going to help you specify the desired categorical information that you're interested in. So as an example, rather than getting data for every single institution that provides data into the PSEO program across the US, I have specified institution 36, which is giving data for degree programs located in New York. Similarly, for zip code or degree program, the code 50 represents people who got a degree in the visual and performing arts. So again, the syntax for this is ampersand, the variable, and equals, and then the value that you want to restrict your results to. We'll be experimenting with this in more detail later. Once you put all of those pieces together and run the query, you get what we've been building up to, this data output. So your output is going to be in JSON format. If you run it in a web browser, it is going to look very similar to this screenshot that I am showing here on screen. So as an example, how do we read this out? The very first row is our list of variables in the order that they appear in. So underneath that, we can see as an example that there are 6,321 people in the 2019 graduate cohort from institutions in New York who are currently employed 1 year after graduation. And then by adding the NAICS variable into this query, it gave us the data not just for the total, but across people employed in individual sectors. So one example, we can see here that 1,143 people who got a degree in visual and performing arts from an institution in New York 1 year later were employed in retail trade, and that number would be 715 people employed in accommodation and food services. So just an example showing you what the data looks like when you get it and kind of why you might want to use it. This was brought to my attention by Erlene, where the New York State Department of Labor kind of looks at this metric of the percentage of graduates from a degree program that are employed in industries that you might not expect. Retail trade or accommodation and food services wouldn't be something you would typically expect for visual and performing arts graduates, and that may be a proxy indicator for underemployment of these newly graduated bachelor's degree holders. So now that we've kind of walked through an example, let's show you a live demonstration where you will see how easy it is to get this example query and tweak it rather than building everything out from scratch. So for our example, we're going to start with the QWI data set. I'm going to look at average monthly earnings of new hires by educational attainment in Arizona in Q2 2024. So what you'll do to get started here, I'm going to share my screen and swap over to our live site. We'll go to census.gov/developers. And this is the portion of the presentation I mentioned that will have step-by-step slides you can reference later on that corresponds to the clicks. You get to the main discovery webpage here, and the easiest way to find the LEHD datasets is to click Available APIs at the top. You will get this high-level list. These are the datasets I showed in the first slide of my presentation. You'll notice there is an option for longitudinal employer household dynamics. And when you click into that, you'll see 3 different links. There are 2 for the quarterly workforce indicators. I'm going to click both of those and open them up here in new tabs. So the first one is the API webpage for QWI. It has lots of helpful information that we're going to discuss and talk about referencing later on in the session today. And the second link that was titled Endpoint takes you to the discovery tool. So this is what I was mentioning earlier, where we will be looking for the examples to get our URL. And then going off of that, editing the example URL with the variables of interest. Of note here, the quarterly workforce indicator endpoints, there are 3 of them. The first one provides QWI data for race by ethnicity. The second one breaks it out by sex and age. And then the last one is sex by education. So I'm going to use the final example here, quarterly workforce indicators, sex by education. And I'm going to click the examples query to get started. So what's really nice about examples, it is going to list out every geographic level that these data are available for. You can see the data are available at the state, county, metro area, and workforce investment area level. And then within each of these, you're going to get, in some cases, more than one example query to start off of. We were interested in getting the data for Arizona, which is the state level. There's only one example query. If you do see differences in the queries, you'll notice that the geography portion of these queries will be slightly different. So in this case, again, the only option is the one example query, and it says &4 equals state : 01. It just means it's giving you data for state 01, which is Alabama. So when I open that up, if you copied the portion with your API key, you would either need to insert the key or delete that portion of the query. This case, it has deleted that portion of the query, and we are instantly retrieving some data for this particular data request. From here, we'll just continue to make edits. So we mentioned earlier, state 01 is Alabama. The state code 04 is for Arizona. And when we get back to the slides, I'll show you some geography resources that you will be able to reference these state codes very quickly. So we have 04, and I like to press enter in between each step that I make. In case I make a mistake, these API queries are entirely case, space, sensitive, and everything you can imagine. It has to be exactly specified the way that it needs to be. Otherwise, it will give you an error. So if you're pressing enter each time you make a change, you will know if you've done it successfully or made a mistake. The next thing, there is a time portion of this particular query. You can see ampersand time equals 2010-Q1 for Q1 2010, as you can imagine. If you'd like to edit that, here we're going to edit to 2024-Q2. Press enter, and it has accepted that update. The only thing that we have to do from here, our geography and time is already specified. We just need to add in the variables of interest, so education and new hires. So going back to our page, for the discovery tool, there was the examples we started with. If you click on variables for the sex by education dataset, it will give you a list of all of the variables you can choose from. There are 83 for this particular dataset. Again, it's very manageable and readable with this QWI dataset. The first one that I'm going to pull is the one for earn HIRNS, so the average monthly earnings for new hires. You can either make note of it. I like to copy and paste to be very precise when I'm entering it into the query. So going back to the API query, I'm actually not interested in breaking this data out by sex, so I'm just going to delete that, add in the earning HIRNS. Be mindful of your capitalization. It is case sensitive. You need to have a comma separating each API variable, and there's no spaces in between them. So we've added our first variable and it's updated our results. The last thing I'm going to do is update this for education. We can see back on the variables page, there is a variable called education. Notice that it says in the concept category that this is a categorical variable. So when we add it to the query, it means we're going to get additional rows of data for each possible value of that categorical variable. So here I have year, comma, education, and then the variable for the monthly earnings. Once I've added that education variable and press enter, you can see our results are updated. We'll zoom in and read it out. You can see in this example, the average monthly earnings for new hires with E4 corresponding to bachelor's degree or higher in the state of Arizona is $5,922 in Q2 2024. So let's step back here to our slides and just recap a couple of the resources we talked about. There are geography lists that give you codes for state names and other geographic areas I've included on the slides. 2 resources for you to reference. And that's where I found that the state code for Arizona was 04. And then let's talk through some categorical variables. The way you find them in QWI API datasets is just reference the concept column. If it's a categorical variable, it will explicitly tell you. Once you have those categorical variables, it will give you data for multiple rows for each possible value. And the easiest way to reference what the values mean, to know that E4 corresponded to bachelor's degree or advanced degree, is to go to this this developer's page for QWI that we opened up in the beginning, and you can navigate and open the files that will give you those details. So here you can view the education characteristics, and then that file tells you what E4 equals to. So let's go back here and see how we can tweak this. There may be times when you want to get data for more than one geography. So in this case, we're going to look at accessing the data for Nevada and New Mexico. And it's really simple. What you do is back at your API query, what we'll see here is when you have the geography portion, &4 equals state, :04, you can add multiple state codes just by typing a comma, add 32 for Nevada and 35 for New Mexico, press enter, and as you expect, you get the data for all 3 of the states instead of just one. So reading this out as an example, we can see for people with a bachelor's degree or higher that were newly hired in Q2 2024. In the case of Nevada, average monthly earnings were $5,449. In the case of state code 35 for New Mexico, that amount was $4,870. And then again, we had previously seen the Arizona value of $5,922. So very simple if you want to add multiple geographies. What if you want the data for multiple time periods? We're going to get back to this in just a moment here. But as far as multiple times, you can also specify the data from Q1 2020 to Q2 2024 rather than just getting data point for that one single quarter. The other piece here is getting data for a particular categorical variable value. So this is when you would add a parameter in. Up until this point, we've been looking at the data for all newly hired employees. If you wanted to restrict it to a particular industry, what you can do is use these parameters. So in this slide, what I'm showing is, as we've been demonstrating, when you plop education into the API request, it gives you data by default for every possible educational attainment value, even if you're not interested in getting the data for all of them. If you ever want to fine-tune your results so you're not overwhelmed with all of this extra data, what you can do is add a parameter at the end of your API request. In this example, you can see on the right-hand side of the screen, we've added ampersand education equals E4. So this is restricting our data to just provide the information for people with a bachelor's degree or higher. So we're going to apply this concept to get data for NAICS 52 while also showing you how to get the data over time. Again, going back here to our slides. We would notice on the variable list that NAICS in all capital letters is a variable name that is compatible with this data set. Sorry, the one for this data set is actually industry in lowercase letters, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. What you would do in this example, at the end of your query, if you add ampersand industry equals 52, that is going to limit our results to people that were newly hired into industry 52, which is for finance and insurance. And then to get the data across time, you would edit the time request of the URL where it says ampersand time equals. You can specify the data for multiple time periods by typing from space, then your starting time. In this case, I'm going to do 2020 Q1 space 2 space and your 2024 Q2 time period. So do make sure that you've entered this exactly, spaces and case sensitive, and press enter, and notice that we get the data updated. So let's read out one of these values here that we're interested in. You can see this one, value E4. This is telling me that in state 32, so state Nevada, within the finance and insurance sector in Q1 2020, the average monthly earnings for new hires with a bachelor's degree or higher is $7,614. So that's definitely, higher values than we were seeing when we were looking at this for the overall number of workers across all industries, not just industry 52. All right, here. So moving on, we're going to now navigate to the PSEO dataset. This dataset works a little bit differently in some regards to QWI. So we're going to show some of those differences as we move along. Ultimately, for this first example, I'm going to look at how to get data for earnings of bachelor degree holders by major from the 2019 cohort. So we'll share our screen again here. And back on our slides, or on the site here, I'm going to go to census.gov/developers and press enter. We're going to start this process just like we did from scratch with QWI. So very similarly, you would click available APIs, drill into the LEHD. Remember, there were 3 different data sets. In this case, we're going to click post-secondary employment outcomes time series. And in this case, there was just the one link. So this link takes you to all of the documentation here for reference purposes. If you have categorical variables, that information is all laid out for you in detail on this page. So I do recommend reading through the information to understand the data that you're looking at. And then right at the top, when you scroll past, you'll see the 2 endpoints. One is for the earnings data, and the other is for the PSEO flows data set. So in this case, I wanted to look at earnings by major. So we're going to use the earnings data set. And what you'll do to open up the discovery tool for this data set is click on the 3rd bullet that says examples and supported geographies. When you zoom out, this will look very similar to what we had for QWI, except in this case, we've navigated to the specific one PSEO data set that we're interested in. But we're going to be clicking on examples and variables just like before. So we'd always start with examples. I'm going to open that here in a new tab. Remember, this lists out every geographic level that these data are provided for. And in this case, the data are provided at the national level. So you're going to be seeing data for all workers in the United States, regardless of where their employer is currently located within the US. And within each of these queries, they are slightly different, but really provide the same information. So the first one just happens to use a wildcard, which gives you data for all available geographies at the national level. We only have one nation that we are providing data for, the US. So it's the same as if you had used US:1. So I'm just going to happen to choose the second one. In this case, it really doesn't matter one way or another which one you choose. And once you open that up in a new tab, in this case, we get a long list of data, and it's not super readable at first glance. So what can we do to start tweaking this for what we're interested in? We see a list of variables, then we see the geography portion of the URL, and then the last ampersands are some of these parameters that have already been put in for us. So let's start with the parameter on the far right. You can see the graduation cohort 2001 is the default for this example query. I mentioned that we wanted more recent data. We're going to be looking at this for the 2019 cohort. So if you edit 2001 to 2019 and press enter, we can see that we've updated the data for the cohort that we're interested in. We get all of these rows of data, and the only label that we're seeing right now is the label for the US. And that is going to be consistent across all of this. So what's actually happening here is we have an institution variable. It is giving us data across different institutions. But because we don't have an institution label in this particular query, it isn't labeling those institutions. It's just giving it for the different institution codes. So if you're like me, I don't know what these institution codes represent for a particular college of interest. You probably want some of these labels added into your query, especially as you're getting started with the data sets. So what you can do in PSEO is actually add those labels in. For QWI, you kind of have to go to those Excel files to cross-reference those labels. For QW or for PSEO, when you click variables, what you'll see is that these data sets have attributes. So notice here, for instance, as I was discussing the institution as a variable and the codes that are provided by this particular output, if you add in the label institution as a variable, that will add that label to your query. So in my case, I'm actually going to be adding a few of these in bulk. The label for the institution, the label for the degree level. We're going to be looking at this for bachelor's degree or higher, and just want to make sure that that's the data we're getting. And then the data for the program of study is called the label for the zip code. So I actually want all three of those. What I've done ahead of time is just grabbed those, copied and pasted, put them in a notepad file, and separated those three with a comma. Just to save a little bit of time here. So going back to my query, I'm going to actually replace name with my labels that I'm truly interested in seeing and press enter. I don't really need that repeating label for the US. In here we have data that is a little bit more readable to us, that we can start understanding what this example query was providing to us in the first place. So what we'll notice here is that you have different universities that each have their own entry in this JSON. For instance, University of Alabama at Birmingham, Fort Lewis College, etc. You can also see here that all of the data are being provided at the bachelor's level. So every row of data has this label in it for bachelor's. The reason for that is this example query had ampersand degree level equals 0.5. And then the next piece of information that we've put in was to get the label for the zip code. Notice that every entry in this is providing data for people that graduated with a degree in computer and information sciences. The reason for that is because our example query had a parameter for ampersand zip code equals 11.01. So that is what that code represents. So now that we kind of have those labels in, we can understand how to tweak this further to get what we're interested in. So I wanted to see the data for all degree programs, not just for computer and information sciences. So all I need to do is delete the zip code parameter. I'm going to press enter. What this has done is updated to the default. So it's giving me one row for each institution, and it's just giving me the data for all of the graduates across every instructional program, rather than providing the data for any particular detailed major. To get the data for all of the detailed majors, what you would do is go back here, make sure that you add the variable in for zip code, and in this case, you just add it to your list of variables. So after institution, I am going to add here the variable for zip code, put a comma, press enter after pasting zip code in capital letters. Now what this has done is given the data for every detailed zip code or degree program for the institution. So our query got much longer once we added that variable in. So I'm just going to read out one of these rows as an example, and I'll just pick one here at random. We can see we're looking at data for anyone that graduated from an institution in Arizona from the 2019 cohort. And for English language and literature letters degree programs, what we can see is that the median earnings 1 year after graduation is $36,051. These next two values is the 25th percentile earnings and the 75th percentile earnings for people with these degrees 1 year after graduation. So moving on here, let's clean this up a little bit more and get more narrow in our focus. But before we do that, I just want to review a few concepts we covered. For categorical variables, remember they were labeled very clearly in the concept when we were looking in QWI API. For PSEO API, what you'll typically find is that most of the string variables are also categorical variables. In those cases, you'll likely see, labels that you'll want to pull in to make sense of the data that you're looking for. A more precise way to find a definitive list of categorical variables and all of the values that are possible is to go to the PSEO page of the API discovery tool and drill into the information shown on screen. So if you were to click institution and view institution codes text file, you could see as an example what the institution code is for a particular university. And then here again, for attributes, you'll likely want to put those labels into your API query if you want to read them as a person or if you want those pulled into your results. What this screenshot is showing is that on the left-hand side at the bottom, in the orange bar where we have label _ zip code, that gives us the readable label for these degree programs. And when we just put zip code in, it makes sure that there are a row of data for these different degree programs, and then it tells you the 2-digit code that corresponds to them. So let's look at this. We had the list of all of the different earnings across every institution and every available degree program. Let's narrow this down to one particular university. For this example, we're going to use Purdue. So back to sharing my screen here. All you would need to do, you could go to those Excel files that I just discussed. You can also use the API results in order to find the information that you're looking for in some cases. So if you press Control F or scroll to the information however you see fit, what you'll find here is that you'll see the information. So Purdue University, we were seeing some of the regional campuses in other entries. The main campus for Purdue University is just called Purdue University. And what we can see is that all of these entries have the same institution code of 00182-500. So you could have got this from the Excel file. You could also get it from this long list of results. And when you put that in your query as a parameter, &institution equals, and enter in that code and press enter, it has restricted our results to just provide the information for Purdue University. So what I want to do from here, as we start wrapping up, is show you how to output this information. So there are two pieces of information that you may want to find helpful before you output. One is called &descriptive equals true. When you do that and press enter, it is going to add an additional row of information here, just reminding you as an example that Y1P5 earnings is the label that corresponds to earnings 50th percentile in year one in 2022 dollars. So just a little bit more specific labeling here for you to have at your discretion. And again, the way you get that is &descriptive equals true. If you'd like to output this into a CSV file, you can put &output format with a capital F equals CSV. And this is another newer function. Download this output in a CSV file so you can look at it in a way that's going to probably be more readable to you. So here I'm going to go ahead and open up that CSV file using Excel. And this is honestly very similar to what you would get if you were to download data from data.census.gov. So the information here has their own cells. And what's nice is you can do lots of cool things once you get this data out of the API and into Excel or whatever program that you're interested in. So it's one use case as an example. If I sort this information from largest to smallest, let's just say hypothetically, I am an advisor or a student at Purdue University. I know I want to go to Purdue, but I haven't quite narrowed down my specific major of study. Maybe I'm in between some different majors. Well, with the data provided here, you can see we've sorted the information for median earnings year one. After getting a degree, we can see the highest paid degree program for students are those who completed a degree in computer science at Purdue University. Then you see several engineering degrees that are earning money highly right out of the gate after graduation without having to go to additional school. So just an example use case and showing you how to output the information. That is going to conclude the demonstration. I have just a few more resources. What I showed to you today was a live demonstration specific to the LEHD datasets. If you'd like some hands-on opportunities to work with an API, we have 2 to 3 hour length workshops online free of charge across the variety of topics. One is specific to the API in general. And then we also have another workshop on finding economic data on data.census.gov in the API. So those may be two that you're interested in. They are offered monthly. And if you don't see a current time slot that works for you, just keep checking back because we will add additional offerings for you. If you're someone that uses data.census.gov, all of the information on our site is fed through the API. So they kind of go hand in hand. In many cases, we happen to have PSEO data on data.census.gov, which is another way for you to access it. But if you're a user, what we're just promoting here is that we're conducting usability testing to help us make the site work better for you. So if you'd like to volunteer as part of this effort, what this would look like is you giving 60 minutes of your time to set up a usability session. We would walk through a series of exercises. You would share your screen, and as you're going, we would ask for you to verbalize your thought process as you're navigating the site, and we would just observe you in real time as you're trying to complete these exercises. It gives us very useful information for how people are intuitively navigating the site so we can make it work better for you. And going back to the API, we also have many resources for you. A resources page for the API includes materials with videos, webinars, PDFs, and the API user guide, which documents a lot of the detailed information that I covered in our live demonstration. If you have questions about the API, we also have a few resources. Census.data@census.gov. You can email us, it'll come straight to our team. We take data questions and feedback. If you'd like a training on the API, you can contact ced.cedsci.outreach@census.gov. And then you can also join a community of users just like yourself on Slack. There is a channel for the API. And at this time, we'll just also have this contact information posted for you. We would start taking your questions.
Thank you, Tyson. Before we get to the questions, as a reminder, the presentation will be accessible on the Census Academy website at census.gov/academy under the webinar tab within 30 days. You'll also be able to find it on the Census and Manufacturing Week webpage at, the links has been added to this chat. Also, again, please type all your questions in the Q&A box and keep your questions pertaining to the presentation. The chat has been disabled to our attendees. For the first question, how would a user request more than 500 API queries in a day?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So that would be a case where you would register for an API key. And it's super simple, so I'll just show you really briefly here on census.gov/developers. At the very top, there's this request a key option. So you would click that button. You literally just read the terms of service, put in your organization name and email address, and that will submit your request, which will promptly get you a key. As far as how you go about using the key in your query, what you would do at the very end is just type ampersand API key equals, and then you put in your key. And then that would lift the 500 API query per day limitation.
Can you show us step 3 again, please? And this is referring to your initial slide presentation?
Yes, I can go back here to, I'm assuming it meant these slides
Correct.
with the arrows. So this step 3 is just after your data set name $get equals is signaling to the API that you are requesting that it returns data to you.
This is referring to your live presentation. How do you know what the variable code E4 means?
Yes, so I read that out first and then kind of covered after the fact. What you would do is go to this QWI webpage on the developers tool, and you'll see different characteristics that you can drill into and open up Excel files that tell you the names. Again, that is for QWI and PSEO, both have this resource. And then for PSEO, you may be able to find these types of categorical variable codes by adding the label into your query. That is an option available for PSEO. And then both data sets, again, have these Excel files for your reference.
I apologize if this was already covered, but is there a way to aggregate this data across all institutions to provide a single median earnings value by a given CIP code?
I am not sure the answer to that question. It would be more for the program. So I would invite you to write us in or invite any of my other colleagues if they have anything to add on the spot. Otherwise, send your question in to us.
Could you show the API with the CSV again?
Could you repeat that question?
Sure. Could you show the API with the CSV again?
Sure. So I'm going to go back to share screen really briefly here. And there will be a slide that covers this when it's posted that show all of the steps. The part for the CSV, you should see my screen. You want to put ampersand output format. It's all lowercase except the F is capitalized equals CSV. So this is what you put in order to generate that download. And then when you open up the download, it is going to look like this.
Thank you, Tyson. This concludes the Q&A section of this presentation. I now turn the mic over back to Erlene.
Thank you, Tanja. And thank you everyone for joining us this afternoon. And thank you to Tyson for his outstanding presentation. Tyson, would you like to make any closing remarks?
Yes, thank you. Well, first, I just wanted to thank you all again for spending time with us to dive into the API. I did want to mention one additional resource. Our data dissemination specialists at the Census Bureau, they are also hosting the session today, and they're part of a team that's located locally to you across the country. So there is a data dissemination specialist assigned to your state. What they provide is any training across the Census Bureau. They don't specialize in a particular tool or topic. They are generalists and specialize in data, and again, assigned to your local area. So if you'd like to reach out to them for a data question or a training request, you can reach them at census.askdata@census.gov or 1-844-ASK-DATA. So we hope that this is the beginning of continued engagement and training from you, and look forward to hearing from you again soon. Erlene, thank you so much.
Thank you, Tyson. That was probably the best closing remarks I've ever heard. So this concludes the December 3rd LED webinar. Join us in December 17th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time when Lawrence Warren and David Wasser present Unemployment Insurance Employment Outcomes, the Composition Reemployment Dynamics of UI Claimants. Upon exiting this webinar, you will receive a pop-up to an evaluation. We would appreciate that you take the time to answer the questions so we may better serve you. On behalf of the U.S. Census Bureau and the LED Partnership, thank you for joining us today and enjoy the rest of your afternoon.